Hello, welcome to my narrated slideshow, Introduction to Poetry. And today's main lesson is free verse is not the same as random verse. This will be a two-part slideshow. Okay, so first of all, as I try to click on what is poetry, poetry uses language that is fresh, vivid, and original in examining a subject. Poetry can be serious, somber, light and airy. It could be humorous, sad, angry, or joyful. And poetry is a wonderful genre for exploring the natural world as well as the full range of human emotion, action, and feeling. Poetry doesn't have to be about, deep subjects. It can be about as something as concrete as a calculator or your computer or your cat. So poetry, I would say, is what it is, and it's not packed with obscure meanings. I think sometimes when we study literature and poetry from a literary perspective, we tend to focus on, well, what does this mean, and so forth. Now, it is true that some poetry contains allusions and references that we might not be familiar with, especially if the poetry is from another time period, and certainly learning what those references or allusions mean can help us understand the poetry, but it is generally just what it says it is. So here's an example. Here, Billy Collins, who's a well-known contemporary American poet, explores a big topic with his poetry. And poetry does this a lot. It explores a big topic without naming the topic. So hopefully I'll be able to get back to my slideshow. Here we go. Let's see how it goes. He's going to read the poem. It's called The Lanyard. Yay, it's working.
The great enemy of writing isn't your own lack of talent, it's being interrupted by other people.
For a TV, the world is thinking.
I'm going to read a poem, read a few more, a poem about what American children tend to do in the summer often. It's called The Lanyard, and it's a poem, I guess with it, what most poets tend to do, which is if you want to write about a topic that's rather large, you choose kind of an image as point of entry, rather than taking on the topic in a frontal way. So, The Lanyard. The other day, as I was ricocheting slowly off the pale blue walls of this room, bouncing from typewriter to piano, from bookshelf to an envelope lying on the floor, I found myself in the L section of the dictionary where my eyes fell upon the word lanyard. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one more suddenly into the past, a past where I sat at a workbench at a camp by a deep Adirondack lake, learning how to braid thin plastic strips into a lanyard, a gift for my mother. I had never seen anyone use a lanyard or wear one if that's what you did with them, but that did not keep me from crossing strand over strand again and again until I had made a boxy red and white lanyard for my mother. She gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted teaspoons of medicine to my lips, set cold face cloths on my forehead, and then led me out into the airy light and taught me to walk and swim, and I in turn presented her with a lanyard. Here are thousands of meals, she said, and here is clothing and a good education. And here is your lanyard, I replied. which I made with a little help from a counselor. Here is a breathing body and a beating heart, strong legs, bones, and teeth, and 2 clear eyes to read the world, she whispered. And here, I said, is the lanyard I made at camp. And here, I wish to say to her now, is a smaller gift, not the archaic truth that you can never repay your mother, but the rueful admission that when she took the 2-tone lanyard from my hands, I was as sure as a boy could be that this useless, worthless thing I wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even.
Okay, so in this poem, Billy Collins is talking about his love for his mother, and he's kind of encapsulating it in this little piece of gimp and plastic. And so he's addressing a big topic through the lanyard. So poetry and rhyme. Poetry emerged as a rhyming genre in a pre-literate era, when ballads and epics were told and retold in the oral tradition and they rhymed. And that was because it is easier to remember words that rhyme. That's why a lot of children's books, especially for younger kids, are written in rhyme. It kind of gets embedded in the brain. And rhyming remained a convention in poetry through the middle of the 19th century. But poems do not have to rhyme. That is not a standard feature of modern poetry. In fact, forcing a poem into a particular rhyme pattern can create unnatural syntax that sounds awkward and jarring to the ear. So, for example, if I were writing about a man walking on the beach, I might just say, the man walked on the beach. That's how we speak. But sometimes emerging poets will twist the order, the syntax, to make the sentence rhyme. Upon the beach walked the man, looking for a yellow can. That's not how we talk, so the resulting poem sounds stiff and stilted. So you want your poems to have natural syntax that reflects the way we speak. So here's my unnatural syntax. Here he is. He's walking along the sand for signs of a missing can, which in a drunken stupor left he there upon the land while listening to a rock band. So that's not how we talk. We wouldn't say, which in a drunken stupor left he there upon the land. We might say, he left the can there when he was walking around in a drunken stupor. So that's unnatural syntax. So the modern form of poetry relies a lot upon free verse. And Walt Whitman broke open poetry when he published what is widely considered the first collection of free verse poetry. And free verse poetry, as I said at the beginning, is not random verse. It's not just taking a bunch of words and throwing them at the wall. It really makes its own pattern, or the poet lets the subject matter define the form, or many other things. The poet would pay special attention to words, line endings, sounds, and other language issues. So some of the features of free verse poetry include a focus on rhythm, such as syllabic patterns or metrical patterns, which we'll talk about in another class. Sound, how sound functions in the poetry, alliteration, assonance, dissonance, as well as some rhyming. Again, we'll get into that in more detail in another class. Line breaks, and we're going to have I'm going to split the slideshow up to specifically talk about line breaks. And this is a preview. I'm going to cut it off here, so this is a manageable length. And I will see you in another slideshow.